Glass exploded across white linen tablecloths as three armed men stormed Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant. Billionaire CEO Bernard Carter hit the floor, his assistant screaming. Security froze. Guests scattered. Death arrived in expensive suits. Then a quiet man in a server's uniform stepped from the kitchen doorway. Arthur Flynn, single-father dishwasher ghost from a life he'd buried. 4 seconds. 3 bodies. 1 shattered mop handle. The video would break the internet with 40 million views. But the real story. It wasn't the fight. It was what happened after. Before we dive in. If you're watching this, stay until the very end, because what starts as a rescue becomes something far more powerful. And comment below with your city so I can see how far Arthur's story travels across the world. Now, let's begin. The autumn rain had been falling on Manhattan for 3 days straight, turning the city into a blur of brake lights and umbrella shadows. Inside Le Jardin Étoilé, the kind of restaurant where reservations required both patience and a certain number of zeros in your bank account, the world felt warm, insulated, untouchable. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over tables dressed in cream linen. The murmur of conversation mixed with the delicate clink of silverware against porcelain. Somewhere in the corner, a pianist played something French and melancholic that made the rain outside seem romantic instead of miserable. Arthur Flynn moved between tables like a man trying to be invisible. He'd been working at Le Jardin for 6 months now, long enough to know which guests tipped well, which ones snapped their fingers at servers, and which tables to avoid during their 3rd bottle of wine. His uniform was pressed, his movements efficient, his face forgettable. That was the point. "Arthur," whispered Marco, the senior server, catching him near the kitchen doors. "Table 12 needs water. Mr. Delacroix is getting impatient." "On it." Arthur grabbed a crystal pitcher, the weight familiar in his hands. Muscle memory from a different life tried to surface the heft of different equipment, different stakes, but he pushed it down. That man didn't exist anymore. That man had died the same day his wife did, leaving behind only a father who needed to be present, steady, safe. For Adelaide. Everything was for Adelaide. He moved toward table 12, refilling glasses with the kind of precision that comes from years of controlling every movement, every breath. Mr. Delacroix barely acknowledged him. Arthur preferred it that way. Across the dining room near the windows overlooking the rain-soaked street sat Bernard Carter. Everyone knew Bernard Carter. Forbes covers, TED Talks. The man who'd built Carter Industries from a garage startup to a tech empire worth $12 billion. Tonight, he wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Arthur's annual salary, his silver hair impeccable, his presence commanding even in stillness. Beside him sat Callista Evelyn. Arthur had noticed her before, not because she was beautiful, though she was in that understated way that made you look twice. No, he noticed her because she seemed lonely. Despite sitting beside one of the most powerful men in New York, despite her designer dress and the way she handled herself with quiet competence, there was something in her eyes. A distance. A wall. He recognized it because he'd built the same wall around himself. "More wine, sir." Another server approached their table. Bernard waved him off, focused on the documents Callista had spread before him. She leaned in, pointing at something, her voice too low to hear. Business, always business. Arthur had learned that Bernard Carter's dinners were never just dinners. They were mobile offices, strategy sessions, disguised as meals. Arthur returned to the kitchen, where the controlled chaos of a Friday night service hummed at full volume. "Order up table 7. Where's the risotto for 15? Someone tell me we didn't run out of the Chilean sea bass." Chef Pierre's voice cut through the noise like a conductor bringing an orchestra to order. Arthur grabbed 2 plates of seared duck, balanced them with practiced ease, and pushed back through the swinging doors into the dining room. 8:47 p.m. He'd remember that time later. Remember the exact moment before everything changed. The front door opened. 3 men walked in. Arthur's instincts, those deeply buried, supposedly dead instincts, fired like warning flares in his brain. Wrong. Everything about them was wrong. They wore expensive suits, yes. They looked like they belonged, almost. But Arthur's eyes caught the details others missed: the way the first man's jacket hung heavy on the left side. The second man's stance weight forward ready. The third scanning the room not like a guest looking for his table, but like a hunter marking exits. The maitre d' approached them smiling. "Good evening, gentlemen. Do you have a reservation?" "We're meeting someone," the first man said. His accent was Eastern European. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Arthur set down the duck at table 9. His heart rate hadn't changed. Years of training kept his body calm, even as his mind shifted into a different gear, one he'd promised himself he'd never use again. He glanced toward Bernard Carter's table. Callista was laughing at something her boss had said, a rare crack in her professional facade. Bernard looked pleased, relaxed. The three men moved deeper into the restaurant. Arthur drifted toward the kitchen doors, positioning himself. Just in case. Just to observe. He told himself he was being paranoid, that civilian life had made him jumpy, that these were just 3 businessmen running late for dinner. Then the first man reached inside his jacket. Time didn't slow down, that was a myth. But Arthur's perception sharpened. Years of training compressed decision-making into fractions of seconds. The gun came out. "Nobody move!" The dining room erupted. A woman screamed. Glass shattered as someone knocked over wine. Chairs scraped against hardwood as guests scrambled backward. The pianist stopped mid-note, his hands frozen above the keys. All 3 men had weapons now. Professional grade, not here to rob the register. They moved straight toward Bernard Carter's table. "Mr. Carter," the first gunman said, almost polite. "You're coming with us." Bernard stood, hands raised slightly. Even facing armed men, he maintained that CEO composure. "Gentlemen, I'm sure we can discuss." No discussion. The second gunman grabbed Bernard's shoulder, yanking him forward. That's when Callista moved. She didn't scream, didn't freeze. She threw her wine glass at the nearest gunman's face and dove for the floor, pulling Bernard down with her. The room exploded into chaos. Gunshots. Not fired yet, but the threat hung in the air as the third gunman leveled his weapon at the cowering guests. "Stay down! Anyone moves! Anyone calls for help!" Arthur was already moving. No thought, no decision. Just muscle memory and a promise he'd made to his daughter echoing in his head. "I protect people, sweetheart. That's what Daddy does." He crossed the dining room in 4 strides. The mop handle leaning against the kitchen wall became a weapon in his hands. Simple physics. Leverage. Precision. First gunman never saw him coming. Arthur drove the handle into the nerve cluster behind his knee, the man's leg-buckled gun clattering to the floor. Arthur caught it before it landed, redirected the barrel, stripped it, and dropped the magazine in one fluid motion. 2 seconds. The second gunman turned, but Arthur was already inside his reach. Elbow to the solar plexus. Redirect the weapon skyward. Use his own momentum against him. The gun fired into the ceiling plaster, exploded, more screams, but Arthur had already swept his legs, driving him face first into the floor. 4 seconds. The third gunman finally processed what was happening. He swung his weapon toward Arthur, finger on the trigger. Arthur threw the mop handle. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't Hollywood. But it worked, struck the man's wrist hard enough to deflect his aim. The shot went wide, shattering a window. Arthur closed the distance, trapped the gun arm, and delivered a controlled strike to the temple. The man went down. 6 seconds total. The dining room fell silent, except for the sound of rain now pouring through the broken window and someone's quiet sobbing. Arthur stood among 3 unconscious men, breathing steady, his server's uniform still crisp. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that had held Adelaide this morning before dropping her at school, the same hands that had washed dishes for hours, the same hands that had once... Oh my God. He turned. Callista was staring at him from beneath the table, her eyes wide. Bernard Carter looked equally stunned. His expensive suit rumpled, his composure finally cracked. "Is everyone all right?" Arthur's voice was calm, almost gentle. He stepped over the nearest gunman and offered his hand to Callista. "Ma'am?" She took it, her fingers trembling against his steady grip. When she stood, he noticed she'd somehow managed to keep her heels on. Impressive. Who are you?" she whispered. "Arthur Flynn, ma'am. I work here." He helped Bernard to his feet next. "Sir, you should sit down. Police will be here soon." "You work here?" Bernard repeated it like the words didn't make sense. "You work here as a server?" "Yes, sir." That was... Bernard looked at the three unconscious men, then back at Arthur. That was Navy SEAL-level combat. Arthur said nothing. His silence was answer enough. The sound of sirens cut through the rain. Someone had called 911. Good. Arthur moved toward the kitchen, already planning his exit. He didn't need police reports, didn't need questions, didn't need... wait. Callista's voice stopped him. "Please don't go." He turned. She was still shaking, but her gaze was direct, searching. "Thank you," she said. "You saved our lives." "Just doing my job, ma'am." "That's not part of a server's job." A small smile touched her lips despite everything. "I'm Callista Evelyn." "Arthur." He nodded. "I know. I mean, I've served your table before." "You remember me?" He hesitated. "You always say thank you to the busboy. Not many people do." Something shifted in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Like she'd just seen him for the first time. The police burst through the front door, weapons drawn. "NYPD, everyone stay where you are." The next 3 hours blurred together. Statements. Questions. Witnesses all telling the same incredible story. The restaurant manager praising Arthur, offering him anything he wanted. Bernard Carter's lawyers arriving in a convoy of black cars. Callista sitting in the corner, wrapped in someone's coat, watching Arthur with that same searching look. He told the police the minimum necessary. Yes, he had military training. No, he hadn't instigated anything. He'd simply defended himself and the guests. No, he didn't know who the attackers were, or why they'd targeted Mr. Carter. Detective Rodriguez, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, closed her notebook. "You're a hero, Mr. Flynn." "I'm a server who wants to go home to his daughter." "You have a daughter?" "Adelaide. She's 8. My neighbor Mrs. Chen is watching her, but she'll be worried if I'm late." Rodriguez's expression softened. "Give me 10 more minutes for the paperwork, then you're free to go. Though I suspect Mr. Carter will want to speak with you." Arthur glanced toward where Bernard stood with his lawyers deep in conversation. Callista was beside him now, no longer trembling back to that professional composure. But when her eyes met Arthur's across the room, something passed between them. Gratitude, yes, but also curiosity. Questions. He looked away first. At 12:30 a.m., Arthur finally stepped out of Le Jardin Étoilé into the rain. His uniform was still clean. His hands were steady. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another restaurant worker heading home after a long shift. Inside, he was still bleeding. Not physically, but the adrenaline was wearing off, and with it came the memories he'd spent 2 years burying. The weight of a rifle instead of a mop handle. The sound of gunfire that meant something different when you were the one pulling the trigger. The faces of men he'd killed in the name of duty, country, mission. He'd promised himself. Promised. Adelaide promised Emma's memory that he was done with that life. Tonight, it had found him anyway. The subway ride to Queens took 40 minutes. Arthur sat in the corner seat, hood up, watching the city blur past in streaks of light. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. He ignored it. By the time he climbed the 3 flights to his apartment, exhaustion had settled into his bones. He unlocked the door as quietly as possible. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch. her glasses askew, the TV playing some late-night infomercial on mute. Adelaide's door was cracked open, a nightlight casting soft shadows. Arthur paid Mrs. Chen, helped her to her own apartment next door, then stood in Adelaide's doorway. His daughter slept with one arm around her stuffed rabbit, her dark hair spread across the pillow. She looked so much like Emma, it hurt. Same delicate features, same way of scrunching her nose in sleep. "Hey, sweetheart," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Daddy's home." She stirred but didn't wake. Safe, peaceful, unaware that her father had just broken his promise about never using violence again. For her, he told himself. He'd done it for her. For all those people in that restaurant. That made it different. Didn't it? Arthur retreated to the living room, sank into the worn armchair, and let his head fall back. The rain drummed against the window. Somewhere in the building, someone was playing music too loud. Normal sounds. Safe sounds. His phone buzzed again. This time he looked. A text from an unknown number. "Mr. Flynn. This is Callista Evelyn. The police gave me your contact information. I hope that's all right. I wanted to thank you properly. Would you be willing to meet for coffee? Please, I'd really like to speak with you." Arthur stared at the message for a long time. He should ignore it. Should keep his head down, keep his life small and safe and invisible. That was the plan. That was how he protected Adelaide from the shadows of his past. But something about Callista's words, "Please, I'd really like to speak with you," made him hesitate. Not the CEO wanting to thank him. Not Bernard Carter offering money or a better job. Callista, the woman who'd thrown a wine glass at an armed gunman. The woman who said thank you to busboys. The woman with lonely eyes and walls like his own. Before he could overthink it, he typed, "Coffee is fine, but I need to be back by 3 p.m. to pick up my daughter from school." The reply came within seconds. "Tomorrow, 10 a.m. There's a cafe near Central Park Cafe Lumiere on 72nd. My treat." Arthur allowed himself a small smile. "See you then." He set the phone down, closed his eyes, and for the first time in 2 years, allowed himself to wonder if maybe, just maybe, his carefully constructed invisible life was about to change. Outside, the rain finally stopped. And somewhere in Manhattan, in a hospital bed, one of the 3 attackers opened his eyes and whispered a name into his phone. "Silas, we have a problem. There was someone there, someone trained. He took down all 3 of us in seconds." A voice on the other end, cold and measured, described him. Average height, dark hair, moved like one of ours. Like special forces. Silence. Then, "Find out who he is. Find out everything. Because if Bernard Carter has protection that good, our employer will want to know." The attacker hung up and stared at the ceiling, his jaw still aching from where Arthur's strike had landed. He'd looked into that man's eyes for just a second before losing consciousness. And what he'd seen there wasn't rage or fear, it was control, the most dangerous kind. Arthur woke at 5:30 a.m. the same time he always did. Adelaide wouldn't be up for another hour, which meant he had time for his routine, 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, a shower, then breakfast prep. But this morning, standing under the hot water, he couldn't stop replaying the previous night. The muscle memory had been automatic, terrifying in its ease. He'd promised himself he was done with violence, yet when the moment came, his body had known exactly what to do. You can't outrun what you are. Emma used to tell him, you can only choose what you do with it. Daddy! He turned off the water, wrapped a towel around his waist. Adelaide stood in the bathroom doorway, her rabbit dangling from one hand, hair wild from sleep. "Morning, princess. You're up early." "I heard you come home late. Were you working?" "Yeah, sweetie, long shift." He knelt down, meeting her eyes. "But I'm here now. Pancakes." Her face lit up. "With chocolate chips." "Is there any other kind?" She giggled, and the sound washed away the previous night's shadows. "This." This was what mattered. Not the fight, not the guns, not the ghosts of who he used to be. Just this little girl and her chocolate chip pancakes. They ate breakfast together. Adelaide chattering about her upcoming school play and how she'd gotten the part of a talking tree. Arthur listened, asked questions, braided her hair the way Emma had taught him years ago. Mrs. Chen said there was something on the news last night, Adelaide said, swinging her legs under the kitchen table. About a restaurant. Did you see it? Arthur's hand stilled for just a moment in her hair. Nope. Must have missed it. She said someone was really brave and stopped bad guys. Sounds like a hero. She said heroes don't always wear capes. Adelaide turned to look at him. Her eyes, Emma's eyes, serious. Do you think that's true? Arthur finished the braid, tied it off with a purple scrunchie. I think heroes are just people who help when they can. Like when you shared your lunch with Tommy last week when he forgot his. That's different. Not really. Being brave comes in all sizes, Ad. She seemed to accept this, turning back to her pancakes. But Arthur caught her watching him in that peculiar way children have, like they see more than adults give them credit for. At 8:15, he walked her to the bus stop, her small hand in his. The morning was clear, the rain having washed the city clean. Other parents stood in clusters discussing their weekends. Arthur stayed quiet, nodded politely, kept his distance. Daddy? Adelaide looked up at him as the bus pulled around the corner. I love you. I love you too, Princess, more than anything. She hugged him tight, then climbed onto the bus, waving from a window as it pulled away. Arthur waved back until it disappeared around the corner. Then his phone buzzed. A reminder. Coffee with Callista, 10 a.m. He had 2 hours. Café Lumiere sat on a tree-lined street near Central Park, the kind of place where NYU students typed on laptops and couples lingered over espresso. Arthur arrived 15 minutes early. Old habits, and chose a table near the back with a clear view of the entrance. At exactly 10 a.m., Callista walked in. She wore jeans and a simple cream sweater, her dark hair loose around her shoulders. Without the business attire, she looked younger, less guarded. She spotted him immediately, and that same searching look from last night crossed her face. Arthur. She slid into the seat across from him. Thank you for coming. Of course. He'd ordered her a cappuccino based on what he'd seen her drink at the restaurant. Her eyebrows rose when the server brought it over. You remember my coffee order? Occupational hazard. I noticed things. A small smile. I noticed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the cafe hummed with Saturday morning energy laughter, clinking cups, the hiss of the espresso machine. I couldn't sleep last night, Callista finally said. I kept replaying it. Those men, the guns, and then you. She shook her head. It was like watching someone flip a switch. 1 second you were a server. The next, I did what needed to be done. You were special forces. It wasn't a question. Arthur took a sip of his black coffee. Navy. Long time ago. How long? Adelaide is 8. I left when Emma, my wife, got sick. Wanted to be there for her final months, then for our daughter after. Callista's expression softened. I'm sorry. That must have been impossibly hard. Some days still are. He met her gaze. But Adelaide makes it worth it. She's everything. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. He paused. Ms. Evelyn. Callista, please. Callista. I appreciate the coffee, but I'm guessing this isn't just about saying thank you. She laughed, surprised. Direct. I like that. She wrapped her hands around her cup. You're right. Bernard, Mr. Carter wants to offer you a position. Head of security. Significant salary, benefits, everything you'd need to provide well for your daughter. Arthur had expected this. I'm not interested. May I ask why the money alone? I don't do that work anymore. His voice was firm, but not unkind. I'm a father now. That's my job. The restaurant pays enough, keeps my hours flexible for Adelaide. I don't need more. Callista studied him for a long moment. You really mean that? Yes. Most people, if they had your skills, would leverage them. Make a fortune in private security consulting training. I'm not most people. He leaned forward slightly. I've spent enough years in the dark, Callista. Now I want to live in the light. For my daughter. She deserves a father who's present, not one who's constantly looking over his shoulder. Something shifted in Callista's expression. Respect, maybe, or understanding. I get that, she said quietly. More than you might think. Do you? She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. I've spent the last 6 years as Bernard's assistant. Brilliant man, terrible at life outside the boardroom. I've organized his schedule, managed his crises, basically run his life. And somewhere along the way, I forgot to have my own. Arthur found himself leaning in, genuinely curious. So, why stay? Habit, fear. The money's excellent, and the work is consuming. It's easy to lose yourself in someone else's purpose. She paused. But last night when those men came in, you know what I thought. What? This is it. I'm going to die, and I never did any of the things I actually wanted to do. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pathetic, right? No, Arthur said firmly. It's human. We all have that moment where we realize we've been living someone else's life. Is that what happened to you, with the military? Arthur considered the question. Outside, autumn leaves drifted past the window. I believed in the mission. Believed I was making a difference. And maybe I was. But when Emma got sick, I realized I'd been so focused on saving strangers I'd forgotten to protect what mattered most. I can't get back those lost years with her. But I can make sure Adelaide never feels like she's second to anything else. Callista was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was soft. She's lucky, your daughter, to be someone's everything. The loneliness in those words hit Arthur harder than expected. He reached across the table and, after a moment's hesitation, placed his hand over hers. You deserve to be someone's everything too, he said. She looked up surprised. Their eyes met, and Arthur felt something he hadn't felt since Emma, a connection, a recognition. Two people who'd built walls so high they'd forgotten what it felt like to let someone in. Callista didn't pull her hand away. I should go, Arthur said eventually, though he didn't move. Adelaide has a soccer game at 2. Of course. But Callista's fingers tightened slightly on his. Arthur, can we do this again? Just coffee and conversation. He smiled. I'd like that. They exchanged numbers, real ones this time, not passed through police reports. As Arthur stood to leave, Callista called after him. Hey, that thing you said about living in the light? Yeah. Maybe you could teach me how. Arthur paused at the door, looked back at this woman who'd thrown wine glasses at gunmen and spent 6 years forgetting herself. Maybe we could figure it out together, he said. And for the first time in a long time, the future felt like something more than just survival. It felt like possibility. The soccer game turned out to be less about soccer and more about 8-year-olds discovering that dandelions were far more interesting than the ball. Arthur sat on the metal bleachers, cheering every time Adelaide's team, the Purple Dragons, accidentally moved in the right direction. She waved at him from the field, her ponytail bouncing, completely ignoring the ball rolling past her feet. That's my girl, he murmured, smiling. His phone buzzed. A text from Callista. How's the game? He snapped a photo of Adelaide examining a butterfly on the goalpost while her teammates shouted at her and sent it back. Her response came with a laughing emoji. Natural athlete. She's got her own priorities, he typed. Then after a pause. Thank you for coffee this morning. Thank you. Same time next week. Arthur hesitated only a moment before replying. It's a date. Well, not a date, just coffee. You know what I mean. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then I know what you mean. But maybe eventually, It could be a date. He stared at the message, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. It had been 2 years since Emma. 2 years of focusing solely on Adelaide, on building a quiet life, on keeping the world at arm's length. The thought of letting someone in, of risking that kind of vulnerability again, terrified him. But Callista's words from the cafe echoed in his mind. Maybe you could teach me how to live in the light. Maybe they could figure it out together. Maybe. He typed back. Let's start with coffee and see where it goes. Deal. Daddy, did you see I found a ladybug? Adelaide came running over, her hands cupped carefully. Arthur pocketed his phone and gave her his full attention, the way he always did, the way Emma had taught him mattered most. That's amazing, princess. What are you going to name her? Spots. She said it with such seriousness that Arthur had to fight back a laugh. Perfect name. Now get back out there. Your team needs their star dandelion inspector. She giggled and ran back, releasing the ladybug as she went. Arthur watched her go, feeling that familiar ache of love so fierce it almost hurt. This simple Saturday afternoon, this ordinary moment, this was everything he'd fought for. Everything he'd walked away from the seals to protect. He didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street or the man inside taking photos. The week that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Arthur worked his shifts at Le Jardin, where he'd become something of a celebrity among the staff. Chef Pierre kept trying to promote him to manager. The owner offered him a raise. Arthur declined, both preferring to stay in the background where he belonged. But the guests had changed. Some recognized him from the viral video. Yes, someone had posted security footage, and yes, it had exploded online. People whispered, pointed, asked for photos. Arthur hated every second of it. You're famous, Marco teased on Tuesday night, nudging him as they set up for dinner service. My cousin sent me the video. You're like Jason Bourne with a mop handle. I'm a server who wants to do his job and go home. Come on, man. 40 million views. That's insane. You could leverage this. I don't want to leverage anything. Arthur's tone went flat the way it did when he needed people to understand he was serious. I just want to work, Marco. That's it. Marco raised his hands in surrender. Okay. Message received. But the attention didn't stop. A talent agent left her card. A publisher wanted to discuss a book deal. Someone from a morning show called the restaurant asking for an interview. Arthur threw all of it away. On Wednesday, he picked Adelaide up from school and found her unusually quiet on the walk home. What's going on, AD? She kicked a stone along the sidewalk. Some kids were talking about a video, a man who beat up bad guys. They said he looked like you. Arthur's stomach tightened. What did you tell them? That my daddy works at a restaurant and makes me breakfast and helps with my homework. She looked up at him, her eyes uncertain. That's true, right? You just work at a restaurant. He knelt down on the sidewalk, not caring about the people having to walk around them. Adelaide, look at me. She did. I do work at a restaurant, and I do make you breakfast and help with homework. That's who I am now. He touched her cheek gently. But a long time ago, before you were born, I had a different job. I was in the military. I learned how to protect people. Like a soldier. And last week some bad people tried to hurt others, and I stopped them. That's all. I'm not going back to that life. I'm staying right here with you. Promise? The word hit him harder than any punch. Promise, princess. You're my whole world. She hugged him then, fierce and tight, and Arthur held her in the middle of the sidewalk as rush hour swirled around them. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling again. Can we have tacos for dinner? Just like that, crisis averted. Children had that gift, the ability to move from fear to tacos in a single breath. Tacos it is. That night, after Adelaide was asleep, Arthur sat at his kitchen table with a beer he wouldn't finish and stared at his phone. Callista had been texting him throughout the week, nothing heavy, just small moments. A photo of terrible coffee at the office, a meme about corporate meetings, A question about whether Adelaide liked art museums, because Bernard had extra tickets. It felt strange, this gradual building of connection. With Emma, it had been instant. They'd met at a friend's barbecue, and within 5 minutes they were finishing each other's sentences. This thing with Callista was different. Slower, more careful. Two wounded people testing the ice before stepping out. His phone rang. Unknown number. Arthur almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Flynn. A woman's voice, professional. This is Detective Rodriguez. We met Friday night at Le Jardin. I remember. Is everything all right? That depends. Do you have a few minutes to talk? Arthur glanced toward Adelaide's door, then moved to the window. What's this about? The three men from the restaurant, we've identified them. Professional contractors, Eastern European connections. They're not talking, but we've traced their communications. She paused. Mr. Flynn, this wasn't random. They were hired specifically to abduct Bernard Carter. I assumed as much. What you might not have assumed is that we've picked up chatter suggesting this isn't over. Whoever hired them is still out there, still wants Carter. And now, another pause, heavier this time. Now they know about you. Arthur's hand tightened on the phone. Explain. One of the attackers made a call from the hospital. We intercepted it. He described you to someone named Silas. Former special operations, now works private sector. Very bad reputation. Rodriguez's voice softened. I'm telling you this as a courtesy, Mr. Flynn. Watch your back, and maybe consider Mr. Carter's security offer. I have a daughter to protect, Detective. I know. That's why I'm calling. These people are thorough. If they think you're a threat to their operation, they'll look into you. Find your vulnerabilities. The word hung in the air like a blade. Vulnerabilities. Adelaide. What do you recommend? Arthur kept his voice steady, despite the fear trying to claw its way up his throat. Stay alert. Vary your routine. If you notice anything suspicious, anyone watching you, following you, call me immediately. She gave him her direct number. And Mr. Flynn, I've seen your file. I know what you're capable of, but you can't protect your daughter and fight these people at the same time. Consider reaching out to Carter. He has resources. After she hung up, Arthur stood at the window for a long time, watching the street below. A car passed. A couple walked their dog. Everything normal, everything safe. Except it wasn't. Not anymore. He'd broken his promise to Adelaide after all. Not by choosing violence, but by allowing violence to find them. The next morning, Arthur did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He called an old number 1 he'd memorized but never thought he'd use again. Stone. The voice was gravelly familiar. It's Flynn. Silence. Then, holy shit! Heard you went domestic. Marcus Stone had been Arthur's team leader, the man who'd taught him half of what he knew about staying alive. They'd saved each other's lives more times than either could count. I need a favor. Name it. Security assessment on my apartment. Electronic sweep. And I need to know if anyone's been asking about me. Stone didn't ask questions. That was the thing about the teams you didn't need to explain. Give me 24 hours. You in trouble? Maybe. Probably. Address. Arthur gave it to him. Marcus, keep it quiet. I've got a daughter. This life was supposed to be over. It's never over, brother. You know that. But we'll keep your girl safe. A pause. Good to hear your voice, Flynn. Even under the circumstances. Yours too. Saturday arrived, and with it, his second coffee date with Callista. This time, they met at a small bookstore cafe in the village, where the smell of old paper mixed with espresso, and someone played acoustic guitar in the corner. Callista looked different again, more relaxed, wearing a green dress that brought out the warmth in her eyes. She'd pulled her hair back, and Arthur noticed for the first time the small scar above her left eyebrow. Story, he asked, gesturing to it as they sat down. She touched it self-consciously. Fell off a bike when I was 12. My brother dared me to ride down this massive hill, and I was too stubborn to say no. Sounds familiar. Adelaide tried to climb the refrigerator last month because I said she couldn't. Callista laughed, and the sound made something warm unfold in Arthur's chest. How is she, Adelaide? She's good. Asked me about the video from the restaurant, though. Kids at school were talking. Oh no, what did you tell her? The truth. That I used to be a soldier, that I protected people, but that life is over now. He stirred his coffee absently. I don't want her growing up thinking violence is the answer, or that her dad is some kind of action hero. I'm just a father trying to give her a normal childhood. You're doing more than that, Callista said softly. You're showing her what it means to put someone else first. To choose love over fear. She met his eyes. That's not nothing, Arthur. He wanted to tell her about Detective Rodriguez's call, about the threats still circling, about how he was terrified that his past had just painted a target on the only person who mattered, but he didn't want to burden her with his fears, not yet. Instead, he asked, "What about you? How's the corporate world treating you?" She groaned. Bernard's been impossible since the attack. Paranoid about every meeting, every deal. He wants me to vet everyone twice, run background checks on partners we've worked with for years. I understand why, but... She trailed off. But I realized something after that night. Life's too short to spend it managing someone else's paranoia. She took a breath, like she was gathering courage. I gave my notice yesterday. Arthur's eyebrows shot up. You quit? I gave him 6 weeks. Enough time to find a replacement, train them properly. But yes, I quit. She smiled, and it was radiant. Terrifying and liberating in equal measure. What will you do? I have no idea. Maybe travel. I've been to 17 countries for business and seen exactly 0 tourist attractions. Or maybe I'll finally use my social work degree for something that matters, instead of scheduling meetings. She laughed. Listen to me. I sound like I'm having a midlife crisis at 32. You sound like someone who's finally choosing herself. That's not a crisis. That's courage. Their eyes met and held. The bookstore buzzed around them. People browsing shelves, the barista calling out orders, the guitar player transitioning into something slow and sweet. But Arthur was suddenly aware only of Callista. The way she looked at him, like he was something more than his past. Like he was just Arthur, just a man worth knowing. I'm scared, she admitted quietly, of making the wrong choice, of ending up alone. You won't be alone. The words were out before he could stop them. I mean, you've got Bernard's friendship, your colleagues, people who care about you. Arthur. She reached across the table and took his hand. I'm scared of this too, whatever this is becoming between us. His heart hammered. Me too. But you make me want to be brave anyway. He turned his hand over, threading his fingers through hers. Then let's be scared together. We'll figure it out as we go. She smiled, and in that moment, Arthur felt something he hadn't felt since Emma died. Hope. Not the desperate kind that comes from wishing things were different, but the quiet kind that whispers, maybe, just maybe, life could surprise you again. They stayed at the cafe for 3 hours talking about everything and nothing. Callista told him about growing up in Boston with 3 brothers who'd treated her like one of the guys. Arthur told her about teaching Adelaide to ride a bike last summer, how she'd crashed into Mrs. Chen's tomato plants, and they'd both laughed until they cried. Bring her next time, Callista said as they finally stood to leave. If you want, I'd love to meet her properly. Arthur hesitated. Introducing Adelaide to someone meant something. It meant this was real. This was going somewhere beyond coffee and conversation. Okay, he said. But fair warning, she's going to ask you a million questions and probably try to show you her entire stuffed animal collection. I can't wait. Outside the bookstore, autumn had painted the village in gold and amber. They walked together toward the subway, neither quite ready for the afternoon to end. Arthur. Callista stopped at the corner. Thank you for seeing me. Not just the assistant or the professional facade, but actually me. Thank you for the same. He touched her face gently, his thumb brushing that scar above her eyebrow. You're braver than you think, Callista Evelyn. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek. So are you Arthur Flynn? Then she was gone, disappearing into the subway entrance, leaving Arthur standing on the corner, with her warmth still on his skin and something dangerously close to happiness blooming in his chest. He didn't see the man across the street lower his camera, didn't notice the black sedan pull away from the curb. But Marcus Stone saw it from his position 3 buildings down. He made a note of the license plate and pulled out his phone. Flynn Stone, we need to talk. Your place 1 hour. And brother, his voice went hard. You've got a tail. Arthur's world tilted. He'd been so focused on the possibility of happiness that he'd let his guard down. Amateur mistake. Deadly mistake. He checked his watch. Adelaide was at a friend's house for a playdate safe for another 2 hours. Enough time. I'll be there, he said, already moving, already shifting back into the mentality he'd tried so hard to leave behind. The walk home took 15 minutes, but Arthur made it in 25, doubling back 3 times, using reflections and storefronts to check for followers. By the time he climbed the stairs to his apartment, he'd confirmed it a professional tale, careful but not invisible to someone with his training. Stone was waiting outside his door, looking exactly like Arthur remembered. Buzz-cut, scarred hands, eyes that missed nothing. Good to see you, brother, Stone said, pulling him into a brief, hard embrace. Wish it was under better circumstances. Inside, Arthur locked the door, checked the windows, then faced his old team leader. Tell me. Stone pulled out a tablet, brought up photos. Black sedan, 2 occupants. They've been on you for 3 days. Professional surveillance, rotating vehicles, different operators. Someone's building a profile. Arthur's jaw tightened. The woman I was with. They got pictures, lots of them. Your daughter too, from the soccer game. Stone's expression was grim. Flynn, whoever these people are, they're not playing. They're mapping your entire life. Detective Rodriguez warned me. It's connected to the restaurant incident. The CEO thing, I saw the video. Impressive work with that mop handle. Stone set down the tablet. Here's what I know: the name Silas that came up, Silas Kovar. Former Spetsnaz, now runs a private military contractor outfit. Very expensive, very effective, very ruthless. If he's involved, this is bigger than a simple kidnapping attempt. Arthur moved to the window, looked down at the street. A mother pushed a stroller. An old man walked his terrier. Normal life continuing obliviously while danger circled. What do they want? Bernard Carter, presumably. But now you've made yourself a problem. You took down 3 of Kovar's men, made him look incompetent. He'll want to eliminate you before trying again. Adelaide is your priority. I know. Stone stood beside him. Which is why you've got 2 choices. Run, take your daughter, disappear, start over somewhere new. Or fight, but if you fight, you need resources. Protection. Backup. Arthur thought of Callista, of the fragile beginning of something good. Of Adelaide's school, her friends, the life he'd carefully built. Running meant losing all of it. Again. I'm done running, he said quietly. I ran from the grief when Emma died. Ran from the memories. Built this small, safe life because I was afraid of anything bigger. But Adelaide deserves better than a father who's always looking over his shoulder. Then you need to talk to Carter. Accept his security offer, but on your terms. Use his resources to protect your daughter while we deal with Kovar. Stone smiled, sharp and dangerous. You think I'm letting you face Spetsnaz alone? The team's scattered, but I can pull in a few favors. Besides, you saved my ass in Kandahar. About time I returned the favor. Arthur felt something ease in his chest. Not relief exactly, but the knowledge that he wasn't alone. that the skills he'd tried to bury could be used to protect instead of destroy. "Okay," he said. "But Adelaide doesn't know about any of this. As far as she's concerned, I'm just her dad." "Understood. We'll keep her safe, Flynn, I promise." They spent the next hour planning. Stone would coordinate surveillance detection reach out to old contacts, start building intelligence on Kovar's operation. Arthur would reach out to Bernard Carter, establish a security protocol that protected Adelaide without disrupting her life. "One more thing," Stone said as he was leaving. "The woman, Callista. She know what she's getting into." "No, and I don't want her involved." "Might be too late for that. They've got photos of you two together. If Kovar thinks she matters to you, she's leverage." The words landed like a punch. Arthur had been so careful for so long, keeping everyone at arm's length to protect them. And now, the moment he'd started to let someone in, he'd made her a target. "I'll handle it," he said. "Don't push her away, brother. You deserve some happiness after everything." Stone gripped his shoulder. "Just be smart about it. Bring her inside the circle. Let her make an informed choice. She seems like someone who'd want to know the truth." After Stone left, Arthur stood in his empty apartment and faced an impossible choice. Tell Callista the truth and risk scaring her away, or keep her in the dark and risk getting her hurt. His phone buzzed. A text from her. "Thank you for today. I haven't felt this hopeful in years." Arthur stared at the words, then typed back, "Can we talk tomorrow, in person? It's important. Everything okay? Will be. I promise." He sent the message, then went to check that all the windows were locked, that the door had its deadbolt engaged, that every shadow was just a shadow and nothing more. At 6 o'clock, Adelaide came home full of stories about her friend's new puppy, and could they please get a dog too. "Maybe," Arthur said, hugging her tight. "We'll see." She chattered through dinner, through bath time, through the bedtime story he read in funny voices. And when she finally fell asleep with her rabbit tucked under her chin, Arthur sat in her doorway and made a silent vow. Whatever was coming, whoever Silas Kovar was, whatever it took, Adelaide would stay safe. His little girl would keep her innocent world of puppies and stuffed animals and soccer games where the dandelions mattered more than the score. Even if it meant Arthur had to become the man he'd tried so hard to leave behind. Even if it meant war. Sunday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline autumn light that made New York look like a postcard. Arthur had barely slept, his mind running through contingencies and worst-case scenarios until the sun finally rose. He made Adelaide her favorite breakfast French toast with strawberries and tried not to let her see the tension coiled tight in his shoulders. "You're quiet, Daddy," she said, syrup on her chin. "Just thinking about work stuff, Princess." "Is it because of the bad men from the restaurant?" Arthur's hand stilled on his coffee cup. "What makes you ask that?" Adelaide shrugged, swinging her legs under the table. "Mrs. Chen said sometimes when people do brave things, other people get jealous. Is someone jealous of you?" Out of the mouths of 8-year-olds. Arthur knelt beside her chair, meeting her eyes. "Some people might be upset about what happened, yeah. But you don't need to worry about that. That's my job, the worrying part. But you'll be okay. You promise?" He kissed her forehead. "I promise. Now finish up. We're meeting someone today." "Who?" "A friend. Her name is Callista. You'll like her." Adelaide's eyes went wide with that particular brand of childhood excitement mixed with suspicion. "Is she your girlfriend?" "She's my friend who happens to be a girl. There's a difference." "Uh-huh." Adelaide grinned like she knew something he didn't. "Does she like stuffed animals?" "I don't know, but you'll probably ask her within 5 minutes of meeting her." "Obviously." They met Callista at Prospect Park, where the autumn colors had turned the trees into flames of orange and gold. Arthur spotted her waiting by the fountain, wearing jeans and a navy sweater, her hair catching the sunlight. When she saw them approaching, her smile was genuine and warm, but Arthur could see the questions in her eyes. She knew something was different about today. "You must be Adelaide." Callista said, kneeling down to the little girl's level. "I've heard so much about you." Adelaide studied her with the serious intensity only children can manage. "Do you like my dad?" "Adelaide." Arthur started, but Callista laughed. "I do. He's a good man." "Do you like stuffed animals?" "Love them. I had a whole collection when I was your age. My favorite was a bear named Mr. Humphrey." That was apparently the right answer because Adelaide's face lit up. "I have a rabbit named Flopsy and a dragon named Steve. Want to see them sometime?" "I'd love that." Arthur watched this exchange, something tight in his chest loosening slightly. Callista wasn't just being polite, she was genuinely engaging with Adelaide, treating her like a person instead of an accessory. Emma would have liked her, he thought suddenly. The realization didn't hurt the way he expected. It felt more like permission. They walked through the park together, Adelaide running ahead to collect interesting leaves, while Arthur and Callista followed at a slower pace. "She's wonderful," Callista said softly. "You can see so much of you in her, that quiet strength." "She's better than me, kinder, braver in ways I never was." Arthur paused, watching his daughter examine a bright red leaf like it held the secrets of the universe. "Callista, there's something I need to tell you. That's why I asked you here today." Her expression shifted, worry creeping in. "Okay. Can we sit?" He gestured to a bench overlooking the pond. Adelaide was still within sight, but far enough away that she couldn't hear. Callista sat beside him, her hands clasped in her lap. Arthur took a breath and told her everything. The surveillance, Silas Kovar, the threat that wasn't over, the choice he'd made to stop running and face whatever was coming. He watched her face as he spoke, saw the shock, the fear, the processing. When he finished, silence stretched between them. A breeze scattered leaves across the path. Adelaide's laughter carried across the park as she chased a squirrel. "So the restaurant attack wasn't the end," Callista finally said. "It was the beginning." "Yes. And these people, they're watching you, watching Adelaide." Her voice went tight on his daughter's name. "Watching me. I'm sorry. I never meant to put you in danger. If I'd known. What, you wouldn't have saved Bernard's life. You wouldn't have protected all those people." She turned to face him fully. "Arthur, you did the right thing. The only thing. Don't apologize for that. But now you're caught in it. Adelaide's caught in it. Then we deal with it." Her jaw set in a way that reminded Arthur of how she'd thrown that wine glass at a gunman. "What's the plan?" He'd expected her to pull away to run. That would have been the smart thing, the safe thing. Instead, she was asking about the plan. "I'm meeting with Bernard Carter tomorrow. Going to accept a modified version of his security offer, not as his head of security, but as a consultant. It gives me access to his resources, his intelligence network, his legal team, if needed. And Adelaide. My friend Marcus, former team member, is coordinating additional protection. Unmarked security at her school surveillance detection around our apartment. She won't know, won't see them, but they'll be there." Callista nodded slowly, processing. "What do you need from me?" "Nothing. I need you safe. These people are professionals, and if they think you matter to me, I do matter to you." It wasn't a question. "And you matter to me. So either we're in this together, or we're not, Arthur. But I'm not running away because things got complicated." He looked at her, this woman who'd spent 6 years managing someone else's life, who'd finally decided to choose herself, who was now choosing to stand beside him instead of walking away. "It could get dangerous," he said quietly. "I threw wine at an armed man. Remember, dangerous, and I have already met." She took his hand. "Besides, Bernard's been asking me to reconsider my resignation. Maybe I'll tell him I'll stay on a few more weeks, just until this is resolved. That way, I'm close, I can help coordinate, I can be a target. Be useful." Her fingers tightened on his. "You're not doing this alone, Arthur. Not when I can help." Adelaide came running back, her pockets stuffed with leaves and a stick she'd decided looked like a magic wand. "Look what I found. Callista, do you believe in magic?" Callista smiled, never letting go of Arthur's hand. "I'm starting to." They spent another hour in the park, Adelaide chattering away about school and her upcoming role as a tree in the fall play, and how she was definitely going to be the best tree anyone had ever seen. Arthur watched his daughter and the woman who was becoming something more than a friend and felt the terrible weight of what he had to protect. That night, after Adelaide was asleep, Arthur stood in his living room and did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He pulled a locked box from the top of his closet, the one he'd promised himself he'd never open again. Inside were the pieces of his old life. Dog tags, challenge coins, photos of men he'd served with, some of whom hadn't made it home. And wrapped in oiled cloth, a single Sig Sauer P226, the pistol he'd carried for years, the one he'd sworn he'd never touch again. He unwrapped it slowly, the weight familiar and terrible in his hands. Checked the action cleared, it confirmed it was exactly as he'd left it. Then he loaded a magazine chambered around and secured it in the quick-access safe he'd installed behind Adelaide's bookshelf. Close enough, if he needed it, hidden enough that his daughter would never know it was there. Marcus called at midnight. "Got eyes on your building. 2-man rotation watching the street entrance. Professional setup, night vision capable. They're not trying to hide anymore. They want me to know they're there. Psychological pressure, classic Kovar tactic. He's trying to make you afraid, make you sloppy." Arthur looked toward Adelaide's room, where nightlight shadows danced on the wall. "It's working. Then we flip it. Use their surveillance against them. I've got a guy who can feed false information through the channels, make them think you're planning to run maybe. Draw them out." "No, I won't use Adelaide as bait." "Not suggesting that. But we can create opportunities on our terms instead of waiting for them to strike on theirs." Marcus paused. "Meeting with Carter tomorrow. 10 a.m., his office. I'll be nearby, and Flynn, watch your back. Cover's people are good, but they're not infallible. Stay sharp." After hanging up, Arthur checked every lock, every window, every shadow. Then he sat in the chair beside Adelaide's bed and watched his daughter sleep until dawn began to paint the sky gray. Monday morning brought rain, the kind that turned Manhattan's streets into rivers of umbrellas and cursing taxi drivers. Arthur dropped Adelaide at school, where 2 of Marcus's people disguised as a crossing guard and a parent with twins kept watch. She kissed his cheek and ran inside, oblivious to the protection circle around her. Bernard Carter's office occupied the top 3 floors of a midtown high-rise, all glass and steel, and the kind of modern luxury that felt cold despite its expense. Arthur gave his name to security, was immediately escorted to a private elevator that opened directly into Carter's executive suite. The view was spectacular. The entire city spread out like a kingdom. Bernard stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the elevator, hands clasped behind him. When he turned, Arthur saw that the confident CEO from the restaurant had been replaced by something more human, fear barely concealed beneath a veneer of control. "Mr. Flynn, thank you for coming." Bernard extended his hand. His grip was firm, but Arthur felt the slight tremor. "Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thank you." "Please sit." Bernard gestured to a seating area away from the massive desk. "More personal." Arthur appreciated the gesture, but remained standing, his back to the wall, where he could see both the elevator and the office entrance. Bernard noticed. "Old habits. Current necessities. Yes, Callista told me about the surveillance, the threat assessment." Bernard moved to pour himself a scotch despite the early hour. "I owe you an apology, Mr. Flynn." "For what?" "For making you a target. If I'd had better security that night, if I'd been more careful about the enemies I've made in business, none of this would have—" "With respect, sir, you're not responsible for other people's violence. Those men made their choice. I made mine." Bernard took a long drink, studying Arthur over the rim of his glass. "Callista also told me you've reconsidered my security offer." Not in the capacity I originally proposed, but as a consultant. I need resources, not a career change. My priority is my daughter's safety and maintaining as much normalcy in her life as possible. I can't do that while working full-time security detail. Understood. What exactly are you proposing? Arthur had thought about this carefully. Access to your intelligence network and security infrastructure. Legal support if this escalates to the point where law enforcement gets involved. And financial backing for enhanced protection measures not for me, but for Adelaide. Surveillance detection safe house options if necessary, emergency extraction protocols. Done. All of it. Bernard didn't hesitate. I'll have my lawyers draw up a consulting contract. Name your rate. I don't need your money. Mr. Flynn, what I need is the assurance that if something happens to me, Adelaide is protected. That she's taken care of, educated, safe. Not out of charity, but because I helped you when it mattered. Bernard set down his glass, and for the first time since Arthur had entered the office, he saw genuine emotion cross the CEO's face. You have my word, and I'll put it in writing, a trust fund for Adelaide's education and care, managed by my personal attorneys. If anything happens to you, she'll never want for anything. It wasn't what Arthur wanted to hear, the implicit acknowledgement that he might not survive what was coming. But it was necessary. He'd learned in the SEALs that hope was good, but contingency planning kept people alive. Thank you. There's one more thing. Bernard pulled a folder from his desk. I've had my investigative team looking into Silas Kovar. The man's a ghost, but we've found some connections. Corporate espionage, industrial sabotage, a few carefully concealed murders. He works exclusively for the highest bidder, and right now, that bidder appears to be Viktor Ashenko. The name meant nothing to Arthur. Who? Russian oligarch tech sector. 3 years ago, I acquired his company. Hostile takeover, complete asset stripping. He lost everything. Bernard's expression hardened. Apparently, he's spent the last 3 years planning revenge. And hired Kovar to abduct you. Or kill me. The intelligence is unclear on the objective. Bernard opened the folder, revealing surveillance photos. What is clear is that after your intervention at the restaurant, Ashenko became obsessed with you. Wants to know who you are, what you're capable of, whether you're a threat to his ultimate goal. Arthur studied the photos. A thin man with cold eyes and expensive suits. Not someone who got his hands dirty, but would pay others to do it for him. Where is he now? New York. Has been for 2 weeks, staying at a private estate in the Hamptons. We believe he's waiting for Kovar to complete the operation before leaving the country. Then we have a timeline. Kovar won't wait long. Surveillance costs money, and the longer this drags out, the more chances for something to go wrong on their end. My security team estimates we have a week, maybe less, before they make their move. Bernard met Arthur's eyes. What do we do? The question hung in the air. Arthur thought about Adelaide's face that morning, bright and trusting. About Callista's hand in his at the park. About the life he'd built, fragile and precious, and worth protecting at any cost. We give them what they want, Arthur said quietly. But on our terms. Bernard leaned forward. I'm listening. For the next hour they planned. Marcus joined them via secure video call, adding tactical expertise. Callista arrived halfway through, having cleared her schedule, and contributed insights about Bernard's routines and vulnerabilities that proved invaluable. The plan was simple in concept, complex in execution. Stage a public event, Bernard's annual charity gala scheduled for Friday night. Use it as bait, drawing Kovar and his team into a controlled environment. Have overwhelming security presence, but make it look routine. Force them to either back off or commit to an attack they couldn't win. It's risky, Marcus said from the screen. You're gambling that they'll take the bait instead of waiting for a better opportunity. Waiting gives them power, Arthur countered. This way we choose the battlefield. And if they don't take it, if they decide to hit softer targets. Marcus's meaning was clear. Adelaide. That's why we have contingencies. Adelaide gets pulled from school Thursday, goes to stay with your team at the safe house upstate. She thinks it's a fun weekend trip with her new security guard friends. We rotate protection details, maintain radio silence, and keep her completely isolated from the event. Callista had been quiet, but now she spoke up. I should be at the gala. If they've been watching me with Arthur, my absence would raise red flags. Absolutely not, Arthur said immediately. He's right, Bernard added. Callista, you're already in enough danger. Which doesn't change if I hide. Her voice was firm. I've been your assistant for 6 years, Bernard. I'm at every major event, always by your side. If I'm suddenly absent from the biggest gala of the season, Kovar will know something's wrong. He'll abort regroup, and we'll be back to waiting for him to strike. Arthur wanted to argue, wanted to demand she stay far away from the danger he'd brought into her life. But he recognized the look in her eyes, the same stubborn courage that had made her throw wine at gunmen. She's right, he admitted, hating every word. But you stay in the center of the room, maximum visibility, surrounded by security at all times. Agreed. They worked through details until the rain outside had darkened to evening. Safe words, extraction routes, communication protocols. Marcus would coordinate the security team, a mix of his former military contacts and Bernard's corporate security, vetted and trusted. Arthur would be there too, not as obvious protection, but as another guest blending in while maintaining tactical awareness. 1 week, Bernard said as they wrapped up. 1 week to end this, or it never ends. After the meeting, Arthur walked Callista out of the building and into the rain-soaked evening. She'd been quiet since agreeing to attend the gala, her earlier confidence fading into something that looked like fear. Second thoughts? Arthur asked as they stood under the building's awning. Terrified thoughts, actually. She laughed, but it was shaky. I keep telling myself I can do this, that I'm brave enough, but, Arthur, what if I'm not? He took her hands, made her look at him. You are. You've already proven that. But being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing it anyway. Is that what you tell yourself when you're afraid? I tell myself I have something worth protecting. Someone worth protecting. He pulled her closer, not caring that they were in public, that people were passing by. I tell myself that fear is just my brain trying to keep me alive, and that's okay. I can be afraid and still do what needs to be done. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. And I don't want you hurt because of me. But here we are, choosing each other anyway. He touched her face gently. That's what this is, Callista. A choice. We can walk away right now, and maybe we'd be safer. But we'd also be alone. She leaned into his touch. I don't want to be alone anymore. Neither do I. They stood there in the rain-scattered light of the city. Two people who'd built walls around their hearts, now choosing to tear them down despite the danger, despite the fear, despite everything rational screaming at them to run. Friday, she whispered. We survive Friday, and then what? Then we figure out what comes next, together. She kissed him, then soft and brief and full of promise. When she pulled back, Arthur saw tears mixing with the mist on her face. Go home to Adelaide, she said. Hold her tight, and I'll see you Friday. Callista. I know. Be careful, stay alert, trust no one. I've got it. She smiled, trying for brave. Now go, before I change my mind and beg you to run away with me to somewhere safe. Is there anywhere safe? Probably not. But it's a nice fantasy. Arthur watched her flag down a taxi, watched her disappear into the evening traffic. Then he turned toward the subway, toward home, toward his daughter and the few precious days they had left before everything changed. Marcus's voice crackled through his earpiece. You're clear, no tails. But Flynn, yeah, Friday's going to be hell. You ready for that? Arthur thought about Adelaide's laugh, about Callista's kiss, about the life he'd built from the ruins of his grief, about how much he had to lose and how far he'd go to protect it. No, he said honestly, but I'll do it anyway. That's all any of us can do, brother. See you Friday. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation and precious, ordinary moments. Arthur took Adelaide to her favorite pizza place, helped her practice her lines for the school play, read her extra bedtime stories. He memorized everything. The way she scrunched her nose when she laughed. The soft sound of her breathing in sleep, the weight of her hand in his. On Thursday morning, he drove her upstate himself to the safe house Marcus had arranged. It was a small farmhouse surrounded by woods far from the city, far from danger. 3 of Marcus's team were already there, including a woman named Sarah, who'd been a combat medic and had a daughter Adelaide's age. "This is so cool," Adelaide exclaimed, running through the house. "It's like a vacation." "Just a few days, princess," Arthur said, kneeling down. "Sarah and her friends are going to take great care of you. You'll have fun, I promise." "When will you come get me?" "Sunday. I have some work things to handle, but I'll be back before you know it." She hugged him tight. "I love you, Daddy." "I love you too, more than anything in the world." Walking away from that farmhouse was one of the hardest things Arthur had ever done, but he did it, climbed into his car, and drove back toward the city. Back toward the gala. Back toward whatever Friday night would bring. His phone buzzed as he hit the highway. A text from Callista Adelaide, safe. "Yes. You, getting my dress altered. Bulletproof fabric is harder to tailor than I expected." Despite everything, Arthur smiled. "You're wearing a bulletproof dress," Bernard insisted. "Apparently, it's designer bulletproof. Only in New York. Stay safe until Friday, please." "You too. And Arthur. Whatever happens, I'm glad I met you." He stared at those words for a long time before responding. "Me too." Friday arrived with clear skies and the kind of autumn perfection that felt like a lie. Arthur stood in his apartment wearing the suit Bernard had sent over, tailored, expensive, with reinforced panels that weren't obvious, but would stop a knife or a small caliber round. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw a ghost staring back. This was it. The moment where his 2 lives, the soldier and the father, the violent past and the peaceful present, would collide. He checked his weapon one last time, secured it in the shoulder holster beneath his jacket, and walked out into the dying light of the day. Whatever happened tonight, someone wasn't walking away. Arthur just had to make sure it wasn't him. The Grand Belvedere Hotel had been built in the 1920s, all marble columns and crystal chandeliers that caught the light like frozen waterfalls. Tonight, it glittered with New York's elite tech moguls, society philanthropists, politicians in $1,000 suits. Champagne flowed. String quartets played. Everyone smiled and pretended the world wasn't sharp-edged and dangerous. Arthur moved through the crowd like smoke, present but unremarkable. The suit Bernard had provided fit perfectly, expensive enough to belong, but not so flashy it drew attention. He'd arrived separately from Bernard, and Callista entered through a side entrance after Marcus's team cleared his approach. "Radio check." Marcus's voice crackled in his nearly invisible earpiece. "All positions sound off." 4 voices responded. Marcus's people positioned at strategic points throughout the venue. Exits covered. Sightlines established. Bernard's corporate security added another 12 bodies, though Arthur trusted them less. Corporate security meant well, but they weren't trained for what might come through those doors tonight. Arthur accepted champagne from a passing waiter, but didn't drink it. His eyes scanned the ballroom in a pattern he'd practiced 1,000 times in a dozen countries. Assess, prioritize, plan. The main entrance, double doors 20 feet high, currently monitored by hotel security. Inadequate, but expected. East and west emergency exits. Marcus had people there. Kitchen access staff only, but that meant nothing to professionals. Windows 3rd floor, not practical for entry, but possible for snipers. Elevator banks controlled access cameras monitored by Bernard's people. And there, near the center of the glittering chaos, stood Bernard Carter and Callista Evelyn. Bernard looked every inch the billionaire philanthropist, working the room with practiced ease. But Arthur could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes occasionally darted to the exits. Callista stood beside him in a midnight blue dress that somehow made her look both elegant and powerful. The bulletproof fabric draped like silk, Arthur would never have guessed its true nature. Their eyes met across the crowded room. She smiled small and tight, and Arthur felt his chest constrict. She shouldn't be here. Should be somewhere safe, far from whatever was about to unfold. But she'd made her choice. They both had. Target acquired. A new voice crackled through the earpiece. One of Marcus's spotters outside. Black SUV tinted windows just pulled up to the South Service entrance. 4 occupants military bearing. Arthur's pulse didn't change, but his awareness sharpened. Marcus. I see them. Holding position. Could be legitimate caterers use that entrance. Or it's them. Or it's them. Marcus agreed. Flynn, stay close to the principals. If this goes hot, your job is extraction, not engagement. Understood. Arthur didn't respond. They both knew that if violence erupted in this crowded ballroom, extraction would mean going through whoever was in the way. He drifted closer to Callista and Bernard, positioning himself near a marble column that offered both cover and clear sightlines. A woman in diamonds tried to engage him in conversation about some charity auction, and Arthur murmured polite nothings while his eyes never stopped moving. Then he saw them. 4 men entering through the main doors, credentials checked by hotel security. They wore staff uniforms, catering company Arthur's mind cataloged automatically. But the way they moved, the slight bulge under their jackets, the pattern of their dispersal into the room, all wrong. Marcus, main entrance. 4 hostiles catering disguise. Confirmed. We're moving to intercept weight. Elevator bank. 3 more. Maintenance uniforms. 7. At least 7, and Arthur would bet there were more he couldn't see. Kovar had brought an army. All units, we are officially compromised. Marcus said, his voice deadly calm. Prepare for engagement. Flynn, get the principals out. Now. Arthur moved toward Callista, keeping his movements casual despite every instinct screaming to run. She saw him coming, read something in his expression, because her smile froze. It's happening, he said quietly, taking her elbow as if leading her into a dance. Don't react, just listen. In 30 seconds, you and Bernard are going to move toward the east exit. Walk, don't run. My people will surround you, but it needs to look natural. Arthur, trust me, please. Bernard noticed them started to approach, but then the lights went out. Total darkness. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Someone screamed. In the chaos and confusion, Arthur heard the distinctive sound of weapons being drawn, the metallic slide of actions being chambered. Everyone down! A voice boomed through the darkness. Russian accent. Bernard Carter, you have 10 seconds to identify yourself, or we start shooting guests. Arthur's hand found Callista's in the dark, pulled her down behind the marble column. He could feel her trembling, could hear her trying to control her breathing. I'm here. Bernard's voice, remarkably steady, came from Arthur's right. Don't hurt anyone. I'm here. Emergency lighting flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Arthur's eyes adjusted immediately, years of training kicking in. He could see the gunmen now, 7 visible, probably more hidden. They wore masks, tactical gear under those staff uniforms. Professional. Prepared. And there, directing them from the main entrance, stood a man Arthur recognized from the briefing photos. Silas Kovar. Tall, scarred, moving with the controlled grace of someone who'd spent decades in combat zones. Mr. Carter. Kovar said, his voice almost pleasant. Finally, we meet properly. You're going to come with us, quietly. Or we kill everyone in this room, starting with the lovely lady in the blue dress. 3 guns swung toward Callista. Arthur's world narrowed to crystalline focus. Time didn't slow. That was a myth, but his perception sharpened probabilities, calculating faster than conscious thought. 7 visible gunmen. Kovar made 8. Hundreds of civilians. Marcus's team in position, but outnumbered. Callista exposed vulnerable 3 weapons aimed at her heart. The math was brutal and simple. People were going to die tonight. He just had to make sure it was the right people. Wait, Arthur said, standing up slowly, hands visible. I'm the one you really want. Every gun in the room swung toward him. Good. That's what he needed. Kovar's eyes locked onto Arthur, recognition flaring. The server. The one who embarrassed my men. He smiled cold and predatory. I've been very interested in meeting you. Well, here I am. Let these people go. Your employer wants Carter fine, but you don't need a ballroom full of hostages for that. True. But I do need insurance. Kovar gestured, and two of his men grabbed Bernard, yanking him forward. Mr. Carter comes with us. As for you, mystery man who fights like Spetsnaz but serves champagne, you're coming too. I have questions. Arthur? No. Callista started, but Arthur cut her off with a look. It's okay, he said softly. Then to Kovar. I'll come. Just let everyone else leave. You're in no position to negotiate. Neither are you. Marcus's voice cut through the tension. He emerged from the shadows near the east exit weapon, drawn his team visible now at strategic points. You're surrounded, outgunned, and in a building we control. Let the civilians leave, take Carter if you must, but this doesn't have to be a massacre. Kovar laughed. You think I didn't plan for security? You think I'm afraid of rent-a-cops and retired soldiers playing hero? He made a gesture, and Arthur heard it, the distinctive sound of explosives being armed. His blood went cold. I have charges placed throughout this building, Kovar continued. Service corridors, electrical systems, structural supports. I press one button, and this beautiful hotel becomes a tomb for everyone inside. So here's what's going to happen. My men and I walk out of here with Mr. Carter and his mysterious bodyguard. Everyone else stays put for exactly 10 minutes. Anyone follows us. Anyone calls the police before that time is up. I detonate. Understood. The room was silent, except for quiet sobbing from some of the guests. Arthur's mind raced through options, all of them bad. If Kovar had really wired the building, and Arthur believed he had, then any resistance meant mass casualties. But letting him leave with Bernard meant a slower death for the CEO. Probably torture, definitely never coming back. Arthur. Callista's whisper was barely audible. Don't do this. Please. He looked at her, memorizing her face in the red emergency lighting. Take care of Adelaide if... No. Don't you dare say goodbye to me. Enough. Kovar's patience was wearing thin. You have 5 seconds to decide. Come willingly, or I start shooting civilians. 5, 4, 3. I'm coming. Arthur stepped away from the column, hands still raised. But I have one condition. You're not negotiating. The woman in the blue dress, Callista Evelyn. You've been watching her taking pictures, building a profile. She matters to me, which means she's leverage you might want later. Let her go with the others, and I'll cooperate fully. Fight you, and even if you win, you'll lose men. Make this easy. Kovar studied him for a long moment. You love her? Yes. Then I should probably kill her just to watch you suffer. Arthur's hand drifted incrementally closer to his concealed weapon. If Kovar even twitched toward Callista, this room was going to explode into violence, regardless of the consequences. But Kovar surprised him. However, dead hostages are worthless, and I don't need the complications. She lives. For now. His eyes gleamed with malice. But understand, mystery man, if you resist, if you try anything heroic, my first call will be to the team I have watching your apartment building in Queens, the one where your daughter's babysitter lives. Mrs. Chen, I believe. Arthur's blood turned to ice. They knew about Mrs. Chen, which meant they'd done more homework than expected. But Adelaide wasn't there. She was safe upstate, hidden away. Kovar didn't know that. It was a bluff built on incomplete intelligence. Still, the threat made Arthur's vision tint red at the edges. Don't. His voice came out flat dead, the voice that had once ordered airstrikes and close-quarters breaches. Don't even think about my daughter. Then cooperate. Kovar gestured to his men. Restrain them both. We're leaving. 2 gunmen moved toward Arthur. He could fight, take them both down in seconds, probably grab their weapons, start cutting through Kovar's team. But the explosives were real. The threat was credible, and Callista was still in the line of fire. So Arthur did something he'd trained his entire adult life to never do. He surrendered. The zip ties cut into his wrists. Hands shoved him forward, weapon pressed to his spine. Beside him, Bernard was similarly restrained, his CEO composure finally cracking as reality set in. As they were marched toward the service exit, Arthur's eyes found Callista one last time. She was standing now, tears streaming down her face, surrounded by terrified guests. "Arthur Flynn," she called out, her voice breaking. "That's his name. Arthur Flynn. He's a good man. A father. He doesn't deserve this." Why was she telling them his name? Then Arthur understood she was making him real, making him human in front of hundreds of witnesses. If he disappeared, if Kovar killed him, there would be a record. People would ask questions. "I know," he mouthed to her. "It's okay. I know." Then he was through the doors into the service corridor, being shoved toward the waiting SUV. The last thing he heard before the doors closed was Marcus's voice, sharp with fury. "Damn it, Flynn, I'm coming after you." "No," Arthur said quietly, knowing Marcus could still hear through the earpiece they hadn't found yet. "Protect the civilians. Get everyone out safe. That's the mission now." The SUV was running doors open. They threw Arthur and Bernard inside 3 armed men, piling in after them. Kovar slid into the front passenger seat, made a phone call in rapid Russian. "Drive," he ordered, and they were moving tires, squealing as they peeled away from the hotel. Arthur counted seconds in his head, building a mental map of their route. They were heading south toward the waterfront. He tested the zip ties, professional grade, too tight to slip. His weapon was gone, taken in the first 30 seconds. But he still had his mind, his training, and the knowledge that help would come. Marcus wouldn't let this stand. But Marcus also had to evacuate the hotel first, make sure Kovar's explosives weren't real, or were disarmed. That gave Arthur a window, maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour before backup could arrive. He'd have to make that window enough. "You're very calm for a dead man," Kovar observed, watching Arthur in the rearview mirror. "I'm very aware of my situation, if that's what you mean." "Navy SEAL. Team 6, if our research is correct. Impressive record. Afghanistan, Syria, classified operations that left no paper trail." Kovar smiled. "You should have stayed in your dishwashing job, Mr. Flynn. This life you tried to leave behind, it never truly lets go." "That's where you're wrong." Arthur met his eyes in the mirror. "I left this life behind the day I chose my daughter over the mission. Everything I've done since has been to protect her from men like you." Noble. Futile but noble. The SUV turned into what looked like an abandoned warehouse district. "Your daughter is safe, by the way. We couldn't find her. Very clever hiding her before the event. But Mrs. Chen, she's currently having a very uncomfortable conversation with my associates." Arthur's jaw clenched, but he forced his voice to stay level. "If you hurt her, you'll do what you're restrained in a vehicle full of armed professionals, heading to a location where my employer is very eager to have a conversation with Mr. Carter. You have no leverage, Mr. Flynn, no options. Tonight, you're just a complication that needs to be resolved." The SUV pulled into a warehouse, the door rolling shut behind them, with a sound like a death knell. Lights flickered on, revealing a space that had been converted into something between an operations center and a torture chamber. Equipment, weapons, and in the center a chair with restraints. They dragged Bernard toward it, but Arthur spoke up. "Wait, let me talk to whoever hired you." Kovar paused. "Why?" "Because Bernard Carter isn't your real target. He's leverage. Ashenko wants revenge. But killing a CEO creates investigations, federal attention problems. Let me offer an alternative." "There is no alternative." "There's always an alternative." Arthur looked at Bernard, hoping the CEO would understand what came next. "Carter Industries has something Ashenko wants more than revenge. The quantum computing patents, the AI development research, billions in intellectual property that got acquired when you destroyed his company. Give him those, and he gets his empire back. Better than revenge, actual power. Kovar's expression shifted, interested despite himself. You think you can negotiate? I think I can offer him something better than a dead CEO and federal investigators. Make the call. Let me talk to him. For a moment, Arthur thought Kovar would refuse. Then the Russian pulled out a satellite phone, dialed, spoke briefly in Russian. He listened, then handed the phone to Arthur. Viktor Ashenko wants to hear your proposal. Arthur took the phone awkwardly with his bound hands. Mr. Ashenko, my name is Arthur Flynn. I understand you want revenge on Bernard Carter for destroying your company. I want more than revenge. The voice on the other end was cultured cold. I want him to suffer, to lose everything as I did. Then killing him is the wrong move. Dead martyrs get sympathy. Living failures get contempt. Arthur was making this up as he went playing for time, trying to create an opening. Work with Carter instead of against him. Force a merger, reclaim your patents through legal channels. Use his own corporate structure to rebuild your empire. It's slower, but it's permanent. Ashenko was quiet for a long moment. Then, an interesting proposal. Put Mr. Carter on the phone. Arthur handed it to Bernard, who'd been watching this exchange with a mix of confusion and understanding. The CEO took the phone, and Arthur watched his face as he listened to whatever Ashenko was saying. I see, Bernard finally said, and if I agree to your terms. A pause. That's substantial, but possible. Another pause, longer this time. I want assurances. Contracts, legal protection guaranteed. The phone was yanked away. Kovar listened, then his face went hard. Problem? Arthur asked. My employer says this is all very interesting. Unfortunately, he doesn't trust any of you enough to negotiate in good faith. Kovar smiled, sharp and cruel. So here's what's actually going to happen. We're going to kill Mr. Carter anyway, make it look like an accident, and my employer will acquire the company assets through the resulting chaos and stock manipulation. As for you, Mr. Flynn, you should never have interfered in the restaurant. You cost me men reputation and time. He pulled out a pistol, aimed it at Bernard's head. Arthur moved. The zip ties were professional grade, but Arthur had spent years learning to escape restraints. His hands had been working at them the entire drive, finding the weak point, applying pressure at the exact angle needed. They snapped. He was already launching himself forward when Kovar's gun went off. The shot went wide. Arthur had hit his arm, redirected the barrel. Bernard threw himself backward. The room exploded into chaos. Arthur got his hands on a weapon, one of the guard's submachine guns, stripped it from his grip, used it to block a knife strike from a second attacker. Years of training compressed into seconds of violence. No wasted movement, no hesitation. One man down. Two. Arthur used their bodies as shields, used the confusion and close quarters to neutralize Kovar's numerical advantage. Kill him! Kovar shouted, backing toward the exit. Arthur dove behind equipment as gunfire erupted. Rounds sparked off metal, shattered lights. He returned fire-controlled bursts, forcing them to cover. Counted rounds, assessed angles. Bernard had managed to roll behind concrete supports, staying low. Good. One less civilian to protect. Arthur moved through the warehouse like a ghost, using every tactical lesson he'd ever learned. Shadows and angles. Misdirection and aggression. This wasn't the clean combat of training exercises. This was brutal, desperate survival. Another guard down. Arthur grabbed his ammunition, kept moving. Then, Silas Kovar did something unexpected. He stopped running, turned, and smiled. Impressive, Mr. Flynn. But you're forgetting something. He held up a phone. On the screen, Arthur could see a video feed, Mrs. Chen's apartment. The old woman tied to a chair, terrified, while one of Kovar's men stood behind her with a knife. Surrender now, or I give the order. Arthur's weapon didn't waver. You're bluffing. Kill her, and you lose your leverage. Perhaps, but you won't risk it, will you? Not when you could save her. Kovar's eyes gleamed. That's your weakness, Flynn. You care too much. In our line of work, caring is fatal. Arthur's mind raced through probabilities. Marcus would be coming, had to be coming. NYPD would be mobilizing. Time was on Arthur's side if he could just stall. But Mrs. Chen's terrified face on that screen made his decision simple. Let her go, Arthur said quietly. Let her go, and I'll put down the weapon. Arthur, no, Bernard started, but Arthur cut him off. She's an innocent old woman whose only crime was being kind to me and my daughter. I won't let her die because of my choices. Noble and stupid, Kovar said. Put down the weapon. Now. Arthur lowered the gun, set it on the ground. Kick it away. He did. Now get on your knees. Arthur knelt, hands behind his head. Every tactical instinct screamed at him that he was making a fatal mistake. But if there was even a chance to save Mrs. Chen, he had to take it. Kovar approached his own weapon aimed at Arthur's head. You should have stayed invisible, Mr. Flynn. Should have kept washing dishes and raising your daughter. Now she gets to grow up without a father. She already did that once, Arthur said quietly. When her mother died. Adelaide's stronger than you think. Stronger than me. How touching. Kovar's finger tightened on the trigger. Any last words? Arthur thought of Adelaide's face that morning, her hug, her simple declaration of love. Thought of Callista's kiss in the rain. Thought of Emma, who'd taught him that love was always worth the risk. Just one thing, he said. The code word is home. Kovar frowned. What? The warehouse door exploded inward. Marcus and his team poured through in a coordinated breach, weapons up, moving with the precision of special operations veterans. Flashbangs detonated. Smoke filled the space. In the chaos and confusion, Arthur threw himself forward, grabbed the weapon he'd dropped, came up firing. Kovar's men didn't stand a chance. Caught between Arthur and Marcus's team, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, they dropped their weapons and surrendered within seconds. Except Kovar himself. He'd made it to a back exit, was already running. Arthur didn't think, just ran after him. They crashed through a door into a maze of shipping containers, the waterfront stretching beyond. Kovar turned, fired. Arthur dodged, returned fire. The Russian was fast, trained, dangerous. They fought through the container maze, trading shots, neither finding clean aim in the darkness and obstacles. Arthur's ammunition ran out. He dropped the weapon, kept pursuing. Kovar emerged onto an open pier, turned to face him. They were both breathing hard, both out of immediate weapons, just two men who'd spent their lives in violence, now meeting in its purest form. You should have let me leave, Kovar said. You threatened my daughter. So this is revenge justice. Arthur shook his head. This is me making sure you never threaten anyone's child again. They came together in brutal close-quarters combat. Kovar was good Spetsnaz training, evident in every move, every counter. But Arthur had something Kovar didn't. He had a reason to survive beyond just survival itself. The fight was brief and vicious. Arthur blocked a strike aimed at his throat, redirected Kovar's momentum, and used the Russian's own force against him. They grappled at the pier's edge, the cold October water churning below. You can't win, Kovar gasped. Even if you kill me, Ashenko has others. This never ends. Maybe not, Arthur admitted. But it ends for you, right here, right now. One final move, a technique Arthur had learned years ago in a different life. Kovar's eyes went wide with realization, then his body went limp. Arthur let him fall unconscious onto the pier. He could have killed him. Part of him wanted to eliminate the threat permanently. But he'd made a promise to Adelaide. Not anymore, Daddy. Promise. Promise. He whispered to the night air. Marcus arrived with zip ties and backup. Building's clear. Bernard's safe. And Flynn. He clapped Arthur on the shoulder. Mrs. Chen's fine. We hit that apartment first. She was scared but unharmed. Her guard is in custody. Arthur felt his knees weaken with relief. Thank you. Thank yourself. You bought us the time we needed." Marcus looked at the unconscious Kovar. "What do you want to do with him?" "Let the law handle him. I'm done with this life, Marcus. For real this time." Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The next few hours would be chaos statements, investigations, media attention Arthur didn't want. But it was over. The threat was contained. Adelaide was safe. Mrs. Chen was safe. And somewhere in the city, Callista was waiting. "Go," Marcus said, reading his mind. "We've got this. Get back to your life, brother. You've earned it." Arthur didn't need to be told twice. He made his way back through the warehouse where Bernard Carter was giving his statement to arriving officers. The CEO caught Arthur's eye, mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." Arthur nodded and kept moving. Out of the building into the night, pulling out his phone with hands that finally stopped shaking. He had 2 messages. One from Callista. "Please tell me you're alive." The other from Sarah at the safe house. "Adelaide's asleep. She had a great day. Asked when Daddy's coming to get her." Arthur typed back to both, "On my way. Home soon." Then he started walking toward the life he'd fought so hard to protect. Arthur found Callista waiting outside the hotel, still in her midnight blue dress, wrapped in someone's coat against the October chill. Police cars and emergency vehicles filled the street, their lights painting everything in alternating red and blue. She was talking to a detective, her face pale but composed, until she saw him walking toward her through the chaos. She broke away mid-sentence and ran. Arthur caught her, and for a long moment they just held each other in the middle of the sidewalk while the city swirled around them. She was shaking. Or maybe he was. Or maybe they both were 2 people who'd survived something they shouldn't have, and were still trying to believe it was real. "I thought..." Her voice broke. "When they took you, I thought I'd never see you again." "I know. I'm sorry." He pulled back just enough to see her face to brush away the tears on her cheeks. "But I kept my promise. I came back." "You're bleeding." She touched his temple where Kovar had landed a hit during their fight. "Doesn't matter. Callista, I need to... Go get your daughter. I know." She smiled through her tears. "Go. Bring Adelaide home. I'll handle things here with the police." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Because that's what people who love each other do. They handle the hard stuff together." She kissed him soft and fierce at the same time. "Now go be her father. We'll have time for everything else later." Arthur wanted to argue, wanted to stay and make sure she was truly safe, but Adelaide had been away from him long enough. 3 days that felt like 3 years. So he kissed Callista one more time, promised to call her from the road, and headed to the parking garage, where Marcus had left him a car with the keys in the visor. The drive upstate took 2 hours, but Arthur barely noticed the passing miles. His mind kept replaying the warehouse Kovar's unconscious body on the pier, the moment when he could have killed him, but chose not to. He'd meant what he said, that life was over. The violence, the tactical operations, the constant edge of danger. He'd proven he could still do it when necessary, but necessary and chosen were very different things. He chose Adelaide, chose peace, chose a future built on hope instead of survival. The farmhouse appeared in his headlights just after midnight, warm light glowing in the windows. Sarah must have been watching for him because she opened the door before he was halfway up the path. "She's asleep," Sarah said quietly. "But she'll want to see you. Second door on the left." Arthur climbed the creaking stairs, his heart somehow fuller and emptier at the same time. Adelaide's door was cracked open, nightlight casting familiar shadows. She was curled up under a quilt, her rabbit tucked under her chin, looking so small and precious, it physically hurt to look at her. He knelt beside the bed and touched her hair gently. "Hey, princess. Daddy's here." Adelaide stirred, her eyes opening slowly. Then recognition hit, and she launched herself into his arms with enough force to nearly knock him backward. "Daddy, you came..." "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I?" He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling her heartbeat against his chest. "This This was what he'd fought for. What he'd always fight for. Did you finish your work stuff? Yeah, sweetheart. All finished. Ready to go home? Can Callista come over tomorrow? I want to show her my stuffed animal collection like I promised. Arthur laughed, the sound surprising him after the night's violence. I think she'd like that very much. They drove back to the city as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. Adelaide fell back asleep in the passenger seat, and Arthur drove through the waking world, feeling like a man who'd been given a second chance he didn't quite deserve, but would spend the rest of his life earning. The next few weeks were a blur of police statements and legal proceedings. Viktor Ashenko had fled the country, but international warrants were issued. Silas Kovar and his surviving team faced enough charges to ensure they'd never walk free again. The media went wild with the story Billionaire CEO saved twice by the same mysterious ex-SEAL, complete with video footage and breathless commentary. Arthur hated every second of the attention. He declined interview requests, refused book deals, and seriously considered changing his name and moving to Alaska. But Bernard Carter had other ideas. They met for lunch at a quiet cafe far from the Manhattan chaos, just two men who'd survived something extraordinary and were trying to figure out what came next. I owe you my life, Bernard said without preamble. Twice now. That's not a debt I take lightly. You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would have done. We both know that's not true. Bernard stirred his coffee absently. Most people freeze. Most people run. You stood between armed men and certain death because it was the right thing to do. He looked up, meeting Arthur's eyes. Let me help you, please. Not out of obligation, but because I genuinely want to see you and Adelaide thrive. Bernard, hear me out. The trust fund for Adelaide's education stands regardless, but I'm also establishing a foundation, the Flynn Evelyn Initiative for single parents who've lost partners. Child care assistance, job training, counseling services. I want you and Callista to help me run it. Arthur sat back stunned. Why that name? Because you both understand loss. You both rebuilt yourselves when it would have been easier to break. That's the kind of strength other people need to see to know they can survive too. Bernard's expression softened. Besides, Callista has officially resigned from Carter Industries. She needs something meaningful to pour herself into. So do you. This could be that. The idea settled into Arthur's mind like a key finding its lock. Not going back to the military world, but using his experience to help others. Building something instead of destroying. Creating a legacy Adelaide could be proud of. Let me talk to Callista, he said. But Bernard, thank you for seeing who we could be instead of just who we've been. That's what friends do, Bernard said simply. And Arthur? We are friends. I know I'm terrible at this whole personal relationship thing, but I want you and Adelaide and Callista in my life. Not as employees or obligations, but as family. The word hung in the air between them. Family. Arthur thought about his small world, just him and Adelaide, for so long. The idea of expanding it, of letting people in, terrified him almost as much as Kovar's guns had. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the bravest thing he could do now was choose love over fear. Family, he repeated, testing the word. Yeah, I think I'd like that. Callista loved the foundation idea immediately, though she insisted on one change. It should be called the Emma Flynn Memorial Initiative, after Arthur's late wife. She should be remembered, Callista said firmly. They were in Arthur's apartment, Adelaide doing homework at the kitchen table, while the adults talked in low voices on the couch. She gave you Adelaide, taught you about love and sacrifice. Her legacy should be part of this. Arthur felt his throat tighten. You're sure having my late wife's name on something you're building? I'm honoring someone who made you the man I love, Callista said simply. Emma deserves that. And Adelaide deserves to know her mother's name means something beautiful. From the kitchen table, Adelaide looked up. Are you talking about Mommy? Arthur and Callista exchanged glances. They'd been careful about their relationship around Adelaide, taking things slow, making sure she was comfortable. But children noticed everything. "Yeah, Princess. Callista suggested we name a charity after your mom, to help other families who've lost someone they love." Adelaide considered this seriously, the way 8-year-olds do when processing big concepts. "Would Mommy have liked that?" "I think she would have loved it." "Okay." Adelaide went back to her math homework like that settled everything. Then casually, as if commenting on the weather, "Callista, are you going to be my new mom?" The question landed like a grenade in the quiet apartment. Callista's eyes went wide, looking to Arthur for help. But Arthur was just as frozen, unsure what the right answer was. Callista started, then stopped. She got up and moved to the kitchen table, kneeling beside Adelaide's chair. "Sweetheart, nobody could ever replace your mom. She was special, and she loved you so much." "I know, but she's gone." Adelaide's matter-of-fact tone was heartbreaking. "And you're here, and Daddy smiles more when you're around. So I thought maybe..." "Maybe what?" "Maybe we could be a family, the three of us." Adelaide looked between them with those two wise eyes. "Is that okay?" Callista's tears came silently tracking down her cheeks as she took Adelaide's small hands in hers. "I would be honored to be part of your family, if you want that. If your dad wants that." "Of course I want that," Arthur said, his voice rough. He joined them at the table, this strange, beautiful constellation of people who'd found each other in the wreckage of loss and violence. "But Adelaide, we need to take it slow. Callista and I were still figuring things out. You love her, right?" "Yes." "And she loves you?" "Yes," Callista confirmed. "Then what's there to figure out?" Adelaide shrugged with the uncomplicated wisdom of childhood. "Love is easy. Grown-ups just make it complicated." Arthur laughed, pulling both of them into a hug. "When did you get so smart?" "I've always been smart. You're just finally noticing." That night after Adelaide was asleep, Arthur and Callista sat on his tiny balcony, overlooking Queens, sharing a beer and watching the city lights. "She's right, you know," Callista said, "about us making it complicated. Love is complicated, especially when you've already lost someone you loved, when you're afraid of losing again." Callista turned to face him. "Arthur, I'm terrified too. I'm terrified of not being enough for Adelaide, of somehow messing this up, of 100 different ways this could go wrong. But I'm more terrified of walking away and wondering what if. So what do? We stop being afraid, or at least we stop letting fear make our decisions." She took his hand. "I love you. I love Adelaide. I want to build a life with both of you. Yes, it might hurt. Yes, something could happen. But isn't the risk worth it?" Arthur thought about Emma, about the years they'd had before cancer stole her away. The joy, the laughter, the ordinary, extraordinary moments. If someone had told him it would end in loss and grief, would he have chosen differently? Never. "The risk is always worth it," he said, "when it's you." 6 months later, Arthur and Callista officially launched the Emma Flynn Memorial Initiative from a small office space Bernard had donated in Brooklyn. The opening day brought more people than they'd expected: single parents, widows, widowers, all looking for the kind of support that could make survival feel like living again. Arthur found himself teaching self-defense classes twice a week. Not tactical combat, but practical skills for people who wanted to feel safer in the world. Callista ran support groups, coordinated childcare, and somehow made every person who walked through their door feel seen and valued. Bernard was there too. Not as the CEO who wrote checks, but as Uncle Bernie, who showed up for fundraisers and stuffed envelopes and played cards with the kids in the after-school program. Watching him interact with Adelaide, teaching her chess, listening to her rambling stories about school, Arthur realized the billionaire had been just as lonely as the rest of them. They were all building something together. Not just a foundation, but a family constructed from choice and love instead of obligation. On a Saturday afternoon in spring, Arthur found himself in Prospect Park again, but this time the setting was different. White chairs lined a small clearing near the botanical gardens. Flowers everywhere. Adelaide in a lavender dress, her hair in elaborate braids courtesy of Mrs. Chen, who'd become their unofficial grandmother, and couldn't stop crying happy tears. Bernard stood at the front in a suit that probably cost more than Arthur's car, looking surprisingly comfortable in the role of officiant. He'd gotten ordained online specifically for this, claiming he wouldn't trust anyone else to get the words right. And there, walking down the improvised aisle on Sarah's arm, because she'd insisted she wanted a woman who understood strength to give her away, was Callista. She wore a simple white dress, flowers in her hair, and a smile that made Arthur forget how to breathe. When she reached him, taking his hands in hers, he saw his whole future in her eyes. "Dearly beloved," Bernard began, and despite the formal words, his voice was warm with genuine affection. "We're gathered here because two people who've survived darkness decided to choose light. Because a man who lost his first great love found the courage to love again. Because a woman who spent years caring for others finally chose to care for herself." Adelaide sniffled from the front row, clutching her rabbit. Mrs. Chen handed her a tissue. The vows were simple. Callista promised to love Adelaide as her own, to build a home where laughter mattered more than perfection, to stand beside Arthur in whatever came next. Arthur promised to let her in completely, to trust her with his fears, as well as his hopes, to choose her every day for the rest of his life. When Bernard pronounced them married and Arthur kissed his wife Adelaide cheered loudly enough to startle a flock of pigeons. The reception was small, held in Bernard's townhouse garden, because he'd insisted, and neither Arthur nor Callista had the energy to argue. The food was perfect. The music was live. Marcus and several of Arthur's old team members showed up, bringing stories and laughter, and the comfortable camaraderie of people who'd survived impossible things together. At one point, Arthur found himself standing with Bernard and Marcus, watching Callista dance with Adelaide to some pop song the 8-year-old loved. "You did good, Flynn," Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Found yourself a good life." "Better than I deserve." "That's the thing about grace," Bernard observed, surprising them both. "None of us deserve it. We just have to be brave enough to accept it when it comes." Later, as the sun set and fairy lights came on in the garden, Callista pulled Arthur aside. "Adelaide wants to ask you something," she said, her eyes shining. "But she's nervous." Arthur found their daughter sitting on a bench picking at her dress. "Hey, princess, Callista said you wanted to talk." Adelaide looked up, and Arthur saw the same expression she'd worn when asking about Callista becoming her mom. Hopeful and scared in equal measure. "You know how some kids have a mom and a dad?" she said carefully. "Yeah. And I have you, and I had Mom Emma, but now I also have Mom Callista." Arthur's heart clenched at the casual way she'd designated their family structure. "That's right." "Well, I was thinking..." She took a deep breath. "Could I call her just Mom? Not to replace Mom Emma, because nobody could. But because she's my mom too now, and it feels weird to keep saying her name when what I mean is Mom." Arthur knelt down, taking her hands. "Baby, that's between you and Callista. If you want to call her Mom, and she's okay with it, then that's perfect. She said I should ask you first, that we should all decide together." Of course Callista had said that, because she understood that family wasn't about replacing loss, but about growing big enough to hold both grief and joy. "Then yes," Arthur said. "If it feels right to you, then yes." Adelaide threw her arms around his neck. "Thanks, Daddy." When they rejoined the party, Adelaide walked straight up to Callista and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "Mom, can we cut the cake now?" Callista's face went through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds before settling on pure joy. "Absolutely, sweetheart. Let's cut the cake." Arthur watched his wife and daughter walk hand in hand toward the dessert table and felt something in his chest, some final locked door he hadn't even known existed, swing open. This was healing. Not forgetting Emma or pretending the pain had never existed, but creating space for new love alongside the old. The years that followed weren't perfect. Arthur still had nightmares sometimes, moments when his training kicked in at unexpected sounds. Adelaide struggled in school when a classmate's parent died, and it brought back memories of her mother. Callista occasionally doubted herself, worried she wasn't doing enough being enough. But they faced it together. The foundation grew, helping hundreds of families navigate grief and single parenthood. Arthur's self-defense classes became legendary in the community, not for teaching violence, but for teaching confidence. Callista's support groups created a network of people who'd survived loss and found purpose again. Bernard became a fixture in their lives, showing up for Adelaide's school plays and soccer games, teaching her about business and compassion in equal measure. He established a scholarship in Emma's name at the university she'd attended, ensuring her legacy continued to touch lives. Mrs. Chen moved into the apartment next door when Arthur and Callista bought a small house in Queens, claiming she needed to be close to her granddaughter. She taught Adelaide to cook, told stories about old Queens, and occasionally reminded Arthur that she'd known he and Callista would end up together from the very first day. On Adelaide's 12th birthday, she asked Arthur to tell her the truth about the restaurant incident. She was old enough now to handle it, old enough to understand that her father had been someone different once. They sat on the back porch of their house, just the two of them, and Arthur told her everything. About the seals, about the missions he'd run, about choosing her over that life. About the night at Le Jardin, and the warehouse, and Silas Kovar. "You could have killed him," Adelaide said when he finished. "But you didn't." "No. Because of your promise to me. Because I'd already lost too much to violence. I wasn't going to let it take my soul too." He touched her face gently. "You saved me, Adelaide. You and your mom, and eventually Callista. You showed me that being strong doesn't always mean being hard. I'm proud of you, Dad, for choosing us over the easy thing. Us will always be the easy choice, Princess. Every single time." When Adelaide turned 18, the foundation held a gala in Emma's honor. It had been 15 years since her death, and the initiative bearing her name had helped thousands of families. Arthur stood at the podium, looking out at the crowd, and saw faces representing every kind of family, traditional and blended, chosen, and born, all of them proof that love came in infinite forms. "My wife Emma taught me that love isn't about perfection," he said. "It's about showing up, about choosing each other even when it's hard. She lived that truth every day, even as cancer tried to steal her light." He paused, finding Callista in the crowd. "And my wife Callista taught me that you can love again after loss. That opening your heart to new joy doesn't diminish old love, it honors it." Adelaide stood between her two mothers in the photo he kept on his desk at the foundation office. Emma smiling from a picture taken before she got sick, Callista with her arm around their daughter at her high school graduation. Past and present, grief and joy, all woven together into something beautiful. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Callista surprised Arthur with a trip back to Prospect Park, to the exact spot where they'd gotten married. They walked through the botanical gardens, older now, but still choosing each other. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up the quiet life you'd planned? You were going to stay invisible, remember? Just you and Adelaide, small and safe." "That wasn't living," Arthur said. "That was hiding. You taught me the difference." "We taught each other." She leaned into him as they walked. "You know what I think about sometimes?" "What?" "That night at the restaurant. What would have happened if you'd stayed in the kitchen, if you'd chosen safety over heroism?" "I don't know." "I do," Callista said softly. "Bernard would have died. I probably would have too. You and Adelaide would have stayed in your small, safe world. And we would have missed all of this, the foundation, the family we built, the lives we've touched. Sometimes the dangerous choice is the right choice." Arthur pulled her close, kissed her temple. "Sometimes the dangerous choice is the only choice, when the alternative is living half a life. No regrets. Not a single one." They stood together in the fading light, two people who'd survived violence and loss and fear, who'd chosen each other despite every reason not to, who'd built something extraordinary from the wreckage of their pasts. Behind them, the city hummed with life. Ahead, the future stretched out full of ordinary, extraordinary moments. Adelaide's college graduation next month, the new initiative branch opening in Boston. Bernard's birthday dinner, where he'd inevitably tell embarrassing stories, and Adelaide would laugh, and Mrs. Chen would cry happy tears. Arthur Flynn had spent years as a ghost, then as a shadow, then as a father trying to stay invisible. But standing here with Callista, in the place where they'd promised themselves to each other, he finally understood what Emma had tried to teach him all those years ago. The greatest victories weren't won on battlefields. They were won in quiet moments of choosing love over fear, community over isolation, hope over despair. They were won by showing up for the people who mattered, by building homes instead of walls, by letting yourself be seen even when it terrified you. He'd saved Bernard Carter's life that night in the restaurant. But the truth was, Bernard and Callista and Adelaide had saved his first. They'd shown him that heroes didn't need to hide in shadows. That strength came in infinite forms. That family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up, who stayed, who chose you every single day. As they walked back toward their car, hand in hand, Arthur thought about the boy he'd been, the soldier he'd become, the father he'd chosen to be, and finally, the man he was now, husband, friend, mentor. Someone who'd learned that the bravest thing you could do was let yourself be loved. The quiet man in the shadows had stepped into the light, and the light, it turned out, was exactly where he belonged.